I still remember the exact time because I stared at the numbers on my dashboard for almost a full minute afterward, 10:17 p.m., a rainy Thursday. My phone rang while I was sitting in the parking lot of a Food Lion outside Fayetteville, North Carolina, debating whether I really needed a gallon of milk at that hour. The caller ID said, "Melissa, my twin sister rarely called that late. Texted, sure. Sent photos of library displays she was proud of all the time. Called after 10 at night? Almost never." I answered on the second ring. "Hey, Missy. Nothing. Just breathing." For a second, I thought the call had dropped. "Melissa." When she finally spoke, her voice sounded so small, I almost didn't recognize it. "He's cheating." The words came out like a whisper, then silence. I sat up straighter. Rain tapped softly against my windshield. What happened? Another pause. Then I heard her breathing hitch. "Lena, I think something's really wrong." I started my truck immediately. Not because she said Derek was cheating, because of the way she said it. I've spent most of my adult life reading people. 18 years in the Army teaches you things. Not mind-readating, not magic, just observation, tone, timing. The difference between fear and embarrassment. Melissa wasn't embarrassed. She was scared. "Where are you?" I asked. "Home? Put me on video." "No. Melissa, no." That single word told me everything. I pulled out of the parking lot. "Turn on the camera." The silence lasted long enough that I almost thought she'd hang up. Then the screen shifted. A blurry bathroom ceiling appeared. Then a light clicked on and my stomach dropped. A dark bruise spread beneath her left eye. Not huge, not bloody, but fresh. Fresh enough that I felt something cold settle in my chest. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Outside, headlights streaked across wet pavement. Inside my truck, everything suddenly felt very quiet. "What happened?" I asked again. Melissa looked away. "You know how he gets." No, she knew exactly what I meant. I wasn't asking for excuses. I was asking for facts, she sighed. "Derek came home angry about what? I don't even know." That answer told me plenty. People don't live in fear because of one bad night. Fear grows from hundreds of small nights, hundreds of moments when you stop knowing what will trigger the next explosion. I gripped the steering wheel. "Did he hit you?" "He shoved me into what?" "The bathroom door." I closed my eyes briefly, 44 years old, and somehow hearing that still made me feel like I was 10, and somebody had pushed my sister on the playground. Melissa and I had been born 8 minutes apart in Knoxville. Growing up, we shared everything. Bedrooms, secrets, clothes, punishments. We even switched places a few times when we were teenagers. Nothing dramatic, mostly school stuff. Once she took a geometry test for me, once I pretended to be her during a parent-teacher conference. Normal twin nonsense, but adulthood had pulled us onto different roads. I joined the Army. She became a librarian. I spent years in deserts and training facilities. She spent years helping kids discover books. I came home with bad knees and a lower back that complained every morning. She came home with reading glasses and a collection of coffee mugs. Different lives, same face, same voice, same stubborn streak. "How long?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I exited the highway. The rain got heavier. "Finally," she said. A while, meaning months, silence. Years more silence. I felt sick, not because I couldn't believe it, because suddenly I could. Certain conversations from the past started fitting together. The way she'd always changed the subject when Derek came up, the nervous laugh, the excuses, the canceled visits, the careful wording, all those little pieces I hadn't connected until now. "He didn't always act like this," she said. "I heard the familiar need to defend him. Victims do that sometimes, especially after a long marriage." "Melissa, I know." "No." I pulled into a gas station and parked. "I need you to listen." She nodded. "I don't care how nice he was 20 years ago." Tears filled her eyes. "I know. I care about tonight." She wiped her face. Then she surprised me. "There's something else. The fear in her voice changed, not physical fear, a different kind, the kind that comes when somebody realizes their entire life might be collapsing. I found bank statements. What kind of statements? Retirement accounts. I frowned. What about them? Money's gone. How much? I don't know, Melissa. A lot. I leaned back in my seat. Now things were starting to make sense. Not all of it, but enough. The cheating, the secrecy, the sudden aggression. Those things often travel together. I found texts, too, from the woman. I think so. Who is she? I don't know. Melissa shook her head. The name was saved as Ray D. I filed that away immediately. Names matter. Patterns matter. Details matter. Where's Derek now? At a bar, I think. You think? He said he was meeting clients. We both knew what that probably meant. I looked at the clock. 11:02 p.m. My apartment was behind me. Knoxville was ahead, almost 6 hours away, and I already knew I was going. Pack a bag. Her eyes widened. What? Pack a bag, Lena. Melissa. She recognized that tone. Army Clear's throat voice. The voice that appeared when decisions had already been made. You are not sleeping in that house tonight. I can't just leave. Watch me. For the first time all evening, she laughed. A tiny laugh. Weak, but real. You always were bossy. Occupational hazard. A few minutes later, we had a plan. Simple, temporary, just enough to buy time. Melissa would leave and stay with her friend Donna outside Emville. Donna had been a nurse for 30 years and owned a small horse farm. Safe place? Quiet place? No, Derek. Meanwhile, I'd drive to Knoxville, check the house, gather documents, figure out what was happening. One night, that's all. Before hanging up, Melissa hesitated. You know what's funny? Probably not. We still sound alike when we're tired. I smiled despite everything. Then it's a good thing I'm exhausted. At 11:38 p.m., after hours of driving through rain and darkness, I let myself into Melissa's kitchen, using the spare key she'd hidden inside an old flower pot years ago. The house smelled faintly like coffee and lemon cleaner. I wore one of Melissa's oversized cardigans, reading glasses, hair pulled back exactly the way she wore hers, not because we planned to fool anyone, mostly because I was cold. I sat at the kitchen table photographing bank statements, retirement records, tax forms, mortgage paperwork. The deeper I looked, the worse things seemed. Then bright headlights swept across the kitchen wall. I froze. A vehicle rolled into the driveway. The engine shut off. Melissa had said Derek wouldn't be home until after 1. I looked at the clock. 11:38 p.m., 2 hours early. The front door opened and heavy footsteps entered the house. The first thing I noticed wasn't Derek. It was the smell. Bourbon, wet pavement, expensive cologne. The kind that tries too hard. His footsteps moved through the foyer and into the hallway, heavy, uneven, not falling down drunk, just drunk enough to think he was smarter than everyone else. I stayed seated at the kitchen table. My phone rested face down beside a stack of bank statements. Recording. The room was lit by a single overhead light. Nothing dramatic, just an ordinary Tennessee kitchen in an ordinary house where too many bad things had become normal. The footsteps stopped for a moment. Neither of us said anything. Then Derek spoke. Why are the lights on? His voice carried the same irritation some people use when talking about a broken lawnmower. Not a person, not a wife. An inconvenience. I kept my eyes on the paperwork. He tossed something onto the counter. Keys, probably a wallet, maybe both. You deaf? Still, I didn't answer. I wanted him to talk. People like Derek always tell on themselves eventually, especially when they think they're in control. I heard a chair scrape, then a refrigerator door open. Ice clattered into a glass. A cabinet slammed. Finally, he looked toward the table. I could feel it, not because he was studying me carefully, because he wasn't. That was the tragedy. 21 years of marriage. And he barely glanced at the woman he thought was his wife. What's all this? I slid another paper into position, still silent. The pause bothered him. Good. His tone sharpened. I asked you a question. Nothing. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The refrigerator hummed. Derek took a few steps closer. "Who the hell do you think you are?" There it was. The line Melissa had heard 100 different ways over the years. Not curiosity, not confusion, control. I slowly looked up. Our eyes met. Something flickered across his face. Not recognition, just irritation. Because Melissa wasn't supposed to look directly at him. Not like that. "Don't you dare look me in the eye." I felt my jaw tighten. Across deployments, training exercises, and more unpleasant situations than I care to remember. I'd met men exactly like him, different jobs, different backgrounds, same need to dominate every room they entered. The difference was that most of them never got 21 years to practice. Derek moved closer. I could see him clearly now. Mid-50s, good suit, expensive watch, redness around his nose from drinking, lipstick faintly visible on his shirt collar, not bright enough for most people to notice, plenty bright for me. His phone lit up on the counter. Just for a second, enough time to see a name. Ray D. Interesting. Very interesting. The screen went dark again. Derek followed my gaze, then casually flipped the phone over. That told me even more. "Answer me." I leaned back in the chair, calm, steady, the way they teach you, the way you learn after years of dealing with frightened civilians and angry men carrying too much ego. "What would you like me to answer?" The moment the words left my mouth, I saw it. Confusion. A tiny crack in his confidence. Not because the voice was different. Melissa and I still sounded remarkably alike, especially when tired. No, it was the tone. Melissa would have answered nervously. Apologetically, I sounded like someone asking a question in a board meeting. Derek frowned. "What?" I folded my hands. "What exactly would you like?" Answered. His eyes narrowed for the first time that night. He looked directly at me, really looked. The silence stretched. Then he shook his head. "You've got some attitude tonight." I almost laughed. Attitude? That was apparently the crime. Not the missing retirement money. Not the cheating. Not the bruise. Attitude. He grabbed the back of a chair and pulled it away from the table. The movement was sudden enough to make the legs screech against the floor. He sat across from me, too close, trying to establish dominance, trying to reclaim control. Classic move. I kept my breathing steady. My knee ached from the long drive. My lower back wasn't thrilled either. At 44, I wasn't built like I had been at 24. But experience has advantages. Youth doesn't. Patience is one of them. Derek pointed at the paperwork. "What are you doing?" "Looking at what?" "Things that belong to Melissa." The words slipped out before I could stop them. His face hardened immediately, not because I'd revealed anything, because I'd said Melissa instead of I. A tiny mistake, but enough. His eyes locked onto mine. For 2 long seconds, neither of us moved. Then he stood slowly, dangerously calm. "What's wrong with you tonight?" I stayed seated. "Maybe nothing's wrong with me." His jaw clenched. "And maybe pigs fly." That actually caught me off guard. For 1 second, I saw the version of Derek people probably liked. The guy who told jokes at church picnics. The guy who charmed customers. The guy who hid behind humor when it suited him. Then it vanished. He stepped closer. "Let me see those." His hand reached toward the documents. I placed my palm over them. No. The kitchen went silent. Absolutely silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. People like Derek don't expect resistance. Not small resistance. Not calm resistance. Especially not from someone they've spent years training to surrender. His face changed. Not rage. Something colder, more dangerous. "Move your hand." "No." The word landed between us. Simple, quiet, final. His nostrils flared. For a second, I thought he might stop, think, reassess. Instead, he reached down and grabbed my wrist. Hard. Not enough to leave damage. Enough to remind someone who held power. At least that was the intention. The moment his fingers tightened, training took over. Not anger, not revenge. Training. I stood, rotated my wrist, shifted my weight. 1 step, One movement, nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. The kind of technique nobody notices until it's already happened. Derek lost balance. His own momentum carried him backward. The chair behind him caught one leg, missed the other. He stumbled, arms windmilling, then crashed awkwardly into a second chair near the counter. The impact sounded louder than it actually was. Wood scraping tile, a startled curse, then silence. I immediately stepped back. Distance. Always distance. My knee sent a sharp bolt of pain through my leg. I ignored it. Derek stared at me from the floor. Not hurt, just shock. What the hell? I rubbed my wrist. You grabbed me. His face turned red. What did you just do? Stopped you. The room went still. His eyes searched my face. Really searched this time, and suddenly I saw recognition. Not complete, but enough. His expression shifted. Confusion, fear, calculation, Lena. I nodded once. Wrong twin. For the first time all night, Derek looked genuinely rattled. The reaction lasted maybe half a second. Then the bluster returned. You've lost your mind. No, you can't be here. I'm here. You're trespassing. I shrugged. Call the police. That wasn't the answer he expected. He climbed to his feet, angrier now, less certain. His phone lit up again. Ready? Without thinking, he answered. Yeah, pause. He listened, then immediately glanced toward me. Bad sign. People only check who's listening when they know they shouldn't be speaking. No, he said quickly. Don't move the rest tonight. Another pause. His shoulders tightened. I said after the banquet. Silence. Then, no, I'll handle Melissa. My heartbeat slowed. Not sped up, slowed. Because suddenly, things were becoming clear. Money, movement, a banquet, plans already in motion. Derek ended the call. Too late. The damage was done. He knew it. I knew it. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. Then he pointed toward the door. You need to leave. I gathered the papers. The recording continued running. Part of me wanted to stay. Wanted answers. Wanted justice right now. But another image pushed into my mind. Melissa sitting on Donna's couch wrapped in a blanket, waiting, scared, trusting me to think clearly, not emotionally. So, I chose evidence. I chose patience. And that choice changed everything. As I reached the doorway, Derek called after me. You'll regret this. I turned. No, I looked him straight in the eye. You will. Then I walked out into the rain, carrying a folder full of documents, a recording in my pocket, and one ugly realization. Derek wasn't finished stealing from Melissa. He was getting ready for one final move, and whatever happened at that retirement banquet was going to matter a lot more than anybody realized. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I grabbed a cheap motel room off Interstate 40 around 3:00 the morning, sat on the edge of the bed, and spent most of the night reviewing documents. The room smelled faintly like bleach and old carpet. The air conditioner rattled every few minutes. Outside 1-8, wheelers groaned past on the highway. Inside, I kept finding reasons to stay awake. Every time I thought I'd reached the bottom of Derek's mess, another piece surfaced. A transfer here, a withdrawal there, names that didn't match, numbers that didn't make sense. By sunrise, I had a yellow legal pad covered in notes, and a headache. At 6:30, I drove to Donna's farm outside Emville. The rain had finally stopped. Mist floated over the fields. A few horses stood quietly near a fence line, their breath visible in the cool morning air. The place felt peaceful, the kind of peaceful that only exists far away from people who create chaos. Melissa was sitting on the front porch wrapped in a blue blanket. A coffee mug rested between her hands. She looked exhausted, not from lack of sleep, from years of carrying too much. When she saw me climb out of the truck, she stood immediately. Well, I walked up the steps. We need help. She didn't ask what that meant. The look on my face answered the question. Donna opened the front door. Coffee first, she said, then disasters. I liked Donna immediately. Inside, The three of us sat around a kitchen table that had probably seen 50 years of family conversations. I spread out the paperwork. Melissa stared at the stack, the way some people stare at medical test results, afraid to look, afraid not to. "What did he say?" she asked quietly. I gave her the short version, not because I wanted to protect Derek, because I didn't want to relive every second of it. He slipped. "What does that mean?" "It means he talked when he should have stayed quiet." Donna handed me a fresh cup of coffee. "That's usually how arrogant people get caught." I nodded. "Pretty much." For the next hour, we worked through documents, retirement accounts, credit cards, mortgage statements, business records. Melissa became quieter with every page. Finally, she pushed one statement away. "I don't understand any of this." The frustration in her voice hit harder than tears would have. I never understood any of it. Nobody spoke. After a moment, she looked at me. "Derek always handled the money." I leaned back. "Why?" She laughed once, a sad laugh. "Because I was bad with numbers." Donna raised an eyebrow. "Were you?" "No." Melissa looked down at the table. "I just believed him." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was unusual, because I'd heard versions of it before. People don't wake up one morning and hand over control of their lives. It happens slowly. A little confidence disappears, then a little more, until one day somebody else is making every decision, and it feels normal. Around 9, I called someone I trusted, Patricia Monroe. Most people called her Patty, 63 years old, family law attorney. Sharp enough to cut steel, she'd helped several military families during ugly divorces over the years. By noon, Patty was sitting at the same kitchen table, reading, highlighting, taking notes. When she finally looked up, nobody liked her expression. "How bad?" I asked. Patty removed her glasses. "Worse than cheating." Melissa visibly flinched. Patty continued. "Your husband has been moving money." "How much?" "We don't know yet." The answer wasn't comforting. Patty slid several pages forward. "These transfers concern me." I looked at the statements. Several withdrawals had been routed through a company account connected to Whitcomb Heating and Air. Not illegal by itself, but strange, especially given the timing. "What about the retirement fund?" Melissa asked. Patty sighed. "There's definitely money missing." The room fell silent. I watched my sister's face. 21 years. 21 years of helping build a life. 21 years of believing they were working toward the same future. And now she was discovering pieces of it had been quietly dismantled behind her back. Donna reached over and squeezed her hand. "You okay?" Melissa nodded, then immediately shook her head. "No." Nobody argued. That was probably the healthiest thing she'd said all day. The next few hours turned into a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Patty contacted a retired forensic accountant named George Bell. George arrived carrying 2 laptops, 3 folders, and enough reading glasses to supply a small pharmacy. Within 30 minutes, he found something important. "Who's RD Consulting?" Melissa frowned. "I don't know." George turned the screen toward us. Several transfers went there. My stomach tightened. Ray D, the name from Derek's phone. There it was again. "Can you trace it?" I asked. George nodded. Eventually, 2 hours later, eventually arrived, and the answer surprised everyone. RD Consulting wasn't owned by a man. It belonged to a woman, Rachel Danner, age 56, divorced, resident of Nashville. For a moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Melissa whispered, "That's her." The other woman, the person we'd all been imagining. I expected anger. I expected betrayal. What I didn't expect was exhaustion. Melissa looked tired more than anything else, like she'd reached the point where even heartbreak required too much energy. Patty leaned forward. "We need information." "How?" "We call her." Melissa looked horrified. "You can't be serious." "I am." "What if she's awful?" Patty shrugged. "What if she's useful?" Fair point. An hour later, I sat on Donna's porch holding my phone. Rachel Danner's number glowed on the screen. I took a breath and pressed call. 3 rings. 4. Then a woman answered. Hello. Her voice sounded cautious. Rachel, who's this? My name is Lena Hartwell. Pause. Okay, you don't know me. That's usually how phone calls start. Not what I expected. I glanced toward the yard where Melissa stood near the horses. I need to ask you about Derek Whitcomb. Silence. Long silence. Then what did he do now? Every alarm bell in my head went off, not because she sounded guilty, because she sounded tired, very tired. You know Derek. Another pause. Then Rachel laughed. Not a happy laugh, the kind people make when life becomes ridiculous. Unfortunately, I walked farther across the porch. Rachel, are you having a relationship with him? Silence. Then wait. Another pause. Who are you exactly? I'm Melissa's sister. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. For several seconds, I thought the call had disconnected. Finally, Rachel spoke very slowly. Melissa. Yes. Derek's wife. Yes. The silence that followed felt endless. Then Rachel said 6 words that changed everything. Derek told me she was dead. I closed my eyes. Across the yard, Melissa watched me, waiting, hoping, terrified. I already knew this conversation wasn't going where any of us expected. Rachel wasn't calling as a mistress protecting a secret. She sounded like someone discovering she'd been lied to, too. Then she added another surprise, and he owes me $82,000. Now I really sat down. Rachel kept talking. The story spilled out piece by piece. Investments, promises, business opportunities, retirement plans. A future Derek had apparently been selling to multiple people at once. When she finally stopped, I looked toward Melissa. Her eyes widened. For the first time since last night, I saw something besides fear, confusion, hope, maybe even relief. Because if Rachel was telling the truth, then Melissa wasn't crazy. She hadn't missed obvious signs. She'd been manipulated by someone who'd spent years practicing. Before hanging up, Rachel said something unexpected. Let's meet. Why? Because I think we're all missing parts of the same story. Where? Rachel answered without hesitation. There's a Cracker Barrel off I-40 halfway between us. I almost smiled. Of course there was. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Then her voice softened. Bring your sister. I glanced at Melissa. Rachel continued. And tell her to bring a folder. Why? Because I'm bringing mine. The call ended. And suddenly I had the feeling Derek's problems were about to get a whole lot bigger. The next morning started with a 3-hour drive, 2 cups of gas station, coffee, and enough nervous energy to power a small town. Melissa sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window most of the way. Fields rolled past, billboards, church signs, tractor dealerships, the familiar scenery of East Tennessee. Normally, she loved road trips. This one felt more like a doctor's appointment nobody wanted to attend. Around noon, we pulled into a Cracker Barrel just off Interstate 40. The parking lot was already crowded. Pickup trucks, SUVs, a couple of RVs, rocking chairs lined the front porch. Families drifted in and out carrying bags from the gift shop. The smell of biscuits and bacon floated through the air every time the front door opened. For a moment, the place felt so normal that it was hard to believe why we were there. Melissa stared at the entrance. What if she's lying? Then we'll know soon enough. What if she's telling the truth? I looked at her. Then we'll know that, too. Neither answer seemed to comfort her. Inside, a hostess seated us in a back corner booth. The restaurant buzzed with lunchtime conversation. Coffee cups clinked ked. Waitresses moved between tables. Country music played quietly overhead. Ordinary life continued around us. I found that oddly reassuring, because ordinary life was exactly what Derek had been threatening to take away. 5 minutes later, a woman approached our table. Silver blonde hair, dark blue blouse, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, confident posture, tired eyes. She looked around 56, and she looked absolutely nothing like the villain I'd imagined. Rachel Danner stopped beside the booth. You must be Melissa. Melissa nodded. Rachel looked at her for a long moment. Then she shook her head. Oh, honey, not pity, not judgment, recognition. The kind that comes from seeing your own mistakes reflected in someone else's face. Rachel slid into the booth across from us. A thick accordion folder landed on the table. The thing looked heavy enough to stop a bullet. I pointed at it. That's not encouraging, Rachel snorted. Wait until you see what's inside. A waitress appeared. Her name tag said Marlene. She looked to be around 70, maybe older. Coffee, ladies. We all ordered coffee. It felt like the most Tennessee thing imaginable. 3 women meeting to discuss financial betrayal and emotional manipulation over bottomless coffee refills. When Marlene walked away, Rachel folded her hands. Okay. She looked directly at Melissa. I owe you an apology. Melissa blinked. For what? For existing in your marriage without knowing it. The statement was so unexpected that even I didn't know how to respond. Rachel sighed. Derek told me you passed away 4 years ago. Melissa stared at her. What? He said cancer. The table went silent. Rachel continued. He showed me pictures. I exchanged a glance with Melissa. Family photos, vacation photos. The photographs hadn't been fake. The story attached to them had been. He said, Lowing you almost destroyed him. Melissa laughed. The sound surprised all 3 of us. Not because anything was funny, because the absurdity finally broke through. Rachel looked confused. Melissa shook her head. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. He told me I was the strongest woman he'd ever known. Rachel's eyes widened. Then she started laughing too. Oh my God, what? He told me the exact same thing. For the first time all day, genuine amusement appeared. Brief, small, but real. I sat back and watched. Something important was happening. Melissa wasn't seeing Rachel as competition. She was seeing another casualty. Another person Derek had lied to. That changed everything. Coffee arrived. Rachel opened her folder. The mood shifted immediately. Inside were printed emails, bank records, investment paperwork, copies of text messages, contracts, receipts, organized with terrifying efficiency. You weren't kidding, I said. I had a lot of time to get angry. Fair enough. For the next hour, we built a timeline. Every document added another piece. Every piece revealed a larger pattern. Derek hadn't been juggling one lie. He'd been juggling dozens, maybe hundreds. One document showed money Rachel had invested into what she believed was a business expansion. $82,000. Another showed promises of future ownership. Another included discussions about retirement plans, future homes, travel, marriage. Meanwhile, Derek had still been living with Melissa, still using joint finances, still moving money around, still pretending he could keep all the stories straight. The deeper we dug, the more ridiculous some of the lies became. At one point, Rachel pulled out a text message. Look at this. I read it. March 8th. Derek claiming he was in Nashville meeting a banker. Melissa immediately frowned. He told me he was in Chattanooga meeting suppliers that day. Rachel blinked. Seriously? Seriously? I pulled out my notebook. Is greater than is greater than. Wait. Is greater than. Is greater than. A few minutes later, we found a gas receipt among the records. Location. Sevierville. Same day, same time frame. Rachel stared at the receipt, then at us, then back at the receipt. So, he wasn't in Nashville. No. He wasn't in Chattanooga. No. Rachel shook her head. Then where was he? I pointed at the receipt, apparently buying beef jerky and a novelty belt buckle. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Rachel burst out laughing. Melissa joined her. Soon, all 3 of us were laughing hard enough to attract a curious glance from a nearby table. Rachel wiped tears from her eyes, so technically he cheated on both of us with a truck stop. I nearly choked on my coffee. The laughter faded, but something important remained. The tension had cracked. Melissa looked lighter, not healed, not even close, but lighter. Eventually, Rachel grew serious again. She pulled out several printed emails. These weren't jokes. These were dangerous. In them, Derek discussed moving assets before retirement, shielding money, protecting accounts, avoiding complications. One message included a phrase that made my stomach tighten: "Move assets before Melissa gets emotional." I handed the page to my sister. She read it twice, 3 times, then slowly set it down. For a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, she looked up at Rachel. "You know what hurts the most." Rachel waited. I spent years wondering what was wrong with me. The restaurant noise seemed to fade around us. Melissa swallowed. I kept thinking if I were smarter, prettier, less difficult. Her voice trailed off. Rachel reached across the table. "No, just one word. Firm. Certain. No." Melissa looked at her. Rachel continued. "This wasn't about you." Then she glanced at me, and it wasn't about me either. Nobody argued because everybody at the table finally understood the same truth. Derek's behavior wasn't caused by the women in his life. The women had simply been standing nearby when he made his choices. By mid-afternoon, our folders were thicker. Our timeline was stronger, and our understanding was much clearer. Then, Rachel mentioned something that changed the entire direction of the fight. Derek's retirement banquet. Melissa looked up. "What about it?" Rachel leaned back. "He plans to announce our engagement." The silence hit like a thunderclap. "What?" Rachel nodded. 200 people. I stared. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." She folded her arms. "Church members, business owners, employees, vendors." Melissa's face slowly hardened. The sadness didn't disappear, but something new appeared beside it. Resolve. For the first time since I'd arrived in Tennessee, she didn't look scared. She looked done. Completely done. Outside the afternoon, sun broke through the clouds. Inside the restaurant, Melissa closed the folder. Then she looked at both of us. "He's not getting that night," Rachel smiled. Neither was I, because suddenly, we all knew exactly where this story was headed, and Derek had absolutely no idea. The retirement banquet was held on a Saturday evening at the Knoxville Marriott. 3 days after our meeting at Cracker Barrel. 3 days of phone calls, 3 days of legal paperwork, 3 days of organizing documents, statements, timelines, and financial records. 3 days of Melissa changing, not dramatically, not like a movie. Real change is usually quieter than that. It happens in small moments, the way somebody starts speaking a little louder, the way they stop apologizing before every sentence, the way they begin looking people in the eye again. By Saturday afternoon, Melissa wasn't fully healed. Nobody heals that fast, but she wasn't hiding anymore, and that mattered. I stood in her living room while she adjusted a navy blue dress she'd bought years ago for a library fundraiser. The dress fit barely. Neither of us were built exactly the way we had been 20 years earlier. Melissa stared at herself in the mirror. "You think this is okay? You've asked me that 4 times. That wasn't an answer. You look great." She rolled her eyes. "You're my sister." "Exactly." I adjusted the collar of my jacket. My knee was already complaining. Standing too long always did that nowadays. Getting older is a strange thing. You still feel 25 inches your head until you bend down to pick something up. Then your joints remind you about every bad decision you've ever made. Melissa looked at me through the mirror. "You nervous?" I smiled, terrified. That finally made her laugh. "Good, because I was nervous. Not about Derek. Not anymore." I was worried about Melissa. The hardest thing she'd done in years was about to happen. She was going to stop protecting him, and sometimes that feels harder than leaving. We arrived at the Marriott shortly before 6. The parking lot was packed. Luxury SUVs, pickup trucks, business sightings, people dressed for celebration. Nobody walking toward the ballroom had any idea what was coming. Inside, hotel staff moved between tables covered in white linen. A large banner hung near the stage. celebrating Derek Whitcomb 40 years of leadership. I stared at it. The irony was almost impressive. Around 200 guests filled the room: employees, customers, local business owners, church members, people who had known Derek for years, people who thought they knew him. Soft music played through ceiling speakers. Servers carried trays of sweet tea and coffee. The entire evening had been carefully designed to celebrate a successful man. A successful lie, as it turned out. Rachel arrived a few minutes later. She wore a dark green dress and carried herself like someone who'd spent years cleaning up her own mistakes. Patty Monroe arrived shortly after. George Bell was there too. Neither looked particularly festive. I liked them even more because of it. Melissa watched guests enter. Her hands trembled slightly. I noticed because I always notice things like that. You okay? She took a breath. No. Good. She frowned. Good means you're taking this seriously. For a second, she looked confused. Then she nodded. Fair point. At 7 sharp, the event began. Dinner came first. Chicken piccata, green beans, mashed potatoes, rolls. The standard banquet menu found in hotel ballrooms all across America. People chatted, laughed, shared stories. Meanwhile, Derek moved from table to table, shaking hands and accepting compliments. Watching him work a room was fascinating. If I hadn't known the truth, I probably would have liked him. That was the scary part. Predators rarely introduce themselves as predators. They introduce themselves as good neighbors. At one point, Derek spotted Melissa. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Just a flicker. Then the smile returned. The public smile, the polished one, the one he'd spent decades perfecting. He approached our table. Melissa. His voice sounded warm enough to melt butter. Melissa looked up calmly. Derek, glad you made it. I'm sure you are. The smile tightened only slightly. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did. So did Rachel. Derek's gaze shifted toward me. Then Rachel, then Patty. His confidence slipped for a fraction of a second, then returned. Enjoy the evening. Nobody answered. He moved on. The ballroom lights dimmed around 8. A slideshow appeared on large screens. Pictures of Derek through the years, company picnics, ribbon cutings, community events, church fundraisers. Applause filled the room. Then Derek walked onto the stage. The audience cheered. I glanced toward Melissa. She sat perfectly still. The only sign of anxiety was the way she twisted her wedding ring. One final habit she hadn't quite broken yet. Derek stepped behind the podium, smiling, comfortable, confident, the king of his own story. He thanked employees, customers, friends, family. Then he started talking about values, loyalty, commitment, hard work, character. The longer he spoke, the more surreal it felt. Finally, he turned toward Melissa. There is one person I need to thank more than anyone. My sister froze. The room followed his gaze. Derek smiled. My wife Melissa. Applause erupted. People turned toward her, smiling, nodding, waiting. Derek lifted his hand dramatically. She's been my rock through every challenge. That's when Melissa stood up. The applause faded. Something changed in the room immediately. People sensed it. They didn't know what, but they felt it. Melissa looked toward the stage. For a moment, I saw the nervous librarian she'd been for years. Then I saw something stronger. A woman who was simply tired of carrying someone else's secrets. Derek. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room fell silent. Don't use me as a decoration tonight. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Derek blinked, then laughed. A quick, nervous laugh. Melissa, no. One word. Calm, clear, final. The smile vanished. Melissa continued. I spent years protecting your reputation. The ballroom remained silent. I won't be doing that anymore. Derek's posture stiffened. Let's talk about this later. No. Every person in that room could hear her now. I've filed for legal separation. Gasps spread through nearby tables. Derek's face lost color. Melissa kept going. There are serious financial questions that are now being reviewed through proper legal channels. The audience shifted uneasily. Business owners exchanged looks. Employees sat straighter. Patty remained completely expressionless, a dangerous sign. Melissa's voice never rose, never cracked, never wavered. If anyone here has invested money with Derek recently, I encourage you to review your records. Now, people were whispering a lot. Derek stepped away from the podium. That's enough. Melissa looked at him. No. Rachel stood. A few heads turned. Then many more. Derek visibly flinched. The reaction told everyone everything. Rachel didn't shout, didn't accuse, didn't create a scene. She simply said, "You told me your wife was dead." The silence afterward felt enormous. Derek's face drained completely. A former employee near the back stood. Then another one of them spoke. He told vendors the company was struggling. Another nodded. Same thing he told us. The room was changing. Not because people suddenly hated Derek, because they were comparing notes, connecting dots, seeing patterns. Derek tried to recover, tried to regain control, but panic makes people sloppy. You people don't know what you're talking about. His voice got louder, then angry. Very angry. Finally, he pointed directly at me. That woman assaulted me in my own house. A few heads turned toward me. I stood slowly. My knee protested. I ignored it. You grabbed me first. Silence, I continued. You said it on a recording. The room shifted again. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. For the first time all evening, he had no prepared speech, no charm, no script, just consequences, and they were arriving all at once. Patty stood beside Melissa, calm as ever. Derek, she said, certain financial protections have already been filed. George adjusted his glasses. And several account reviews are underway. Rachel folded her arms. So are mine. The room wasn't cheering. Nobody was applauding. This wasn't entertainment. It was something more uncomfortable. The truth. Raw and undeniable. I looked at Melissa. Tears filled her eyes. But she wasn't crying because Derek was finally falling apart. She was crying because she wasn't. And in that moment, I understood something. I had spent days imagining revenge, imagining justice, imagining Derek getting exactly what he deserved. But standing there watching my sister hold her ground, none of that felt important anymore. The victory wasn't Derek losing control. The victory was Melissa getting hers back. The banquet ended in confusion. Whispers followed us through the hotel lobby. Questions spread from table to table. Derek remained behind, still arguing, still explaining, still trying to outrun facts. We left him there. The next morning at 6:12 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. I answered. A woman's voice spoke immediately. "My name is Emily Whitem." I sat upright. The name sounded familiar. Then I remembered. Derek's daughter from his first marriage, the woman continued. And there's something about my father you need to know. I didn't know much about Emily Whitem before that phone call, just enough to recognize the name. Derek had mentioned her exactly twice in 21 years, both times briefly. Both times in ways that made it sound like distance was somehow her fault. That alone told me more than he probably intended. At 6:12 Sunday morning, I sat up in bed and answered. My name is Emily Whitem. Her voice sounded tired. Not sleepy, emotionally tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying old disappointments. I rubbed my eyes. Emily, you know who I am. I know you're Derek's daughter. A pause. Then, unfortunately, that told me even more. Outside my motel window, the Tennessee sky was turning pale blue. The day was just beginning, but something told me this conversation had started years ago. I saw a Facebook post about the banquet, Emily said. That was fast. Small town. Fair point. People have been calling me since last night. I leaned back against the headboard. What did you want to tell me? Silence, then a long breath. My father has done this before. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Not because I was surprised, because hearing it out loud made it real, Emily continued. When I was 12, I found hidden credit card statements in our garage. I listened. He told my mom she was bad with money. The words sounded familiar. Too familiar? Was she? No. Melissa heard the same thing. Emily laughed softly. No humor in it. Of course she did. Then the story started coming one after another. Little pieces of a life nobody else had seen. Her mother balancing grocery money while Derek bought things she never knew about. Arguments behind closed doors. Promises broken. Bills hidden. Accounts moved. Control disguised as responsibility. He always had an explanation, Emily said. People like him usually do. That's the problem. She paused. The explanations always sounded reasonable until years later. That hit me harder than I expected, because she was right. Manipulation rarely arrives wearing a villain costume. Most of the time, it arrives wearing confidence, concern, authority, experience. By the end of the call, I felt sadder than angry. Emily wasn't telling me about one bad marriage. She was describing a pattern, a lifetime pattern. When the conversation finally ended, she asked me for one favor. Tell Melissa something. What? Tell her this wasn't because she wasn't enough. My throat tightened. Okay, he would have done it to anyone. After we hung up, I sat quietly for several minutes. Then I called Melissa. She answered immediately. Neither of us had slept much. Was that Emily? Yeah. What did she say? I stared out the window. The truth. Melissa didn't speak, so I told her everything. Every detail, every memory Emily shared, every warning, every similarity. By the time I finished, Melissa was crying. Not because the information hurt, because it helped. Sometimes understanding hurts less than uncertainty. For years, she'd wondered what she'd done wrong. Now she finally knew. The answer was nothing. Absolutely nothing. The following months weren't easy. That's the part people don't always talk about. Stories love dramatic endings. Real life doesn't work that way. Real life keeps going. Monday still arrives, bills still show up, laundry still needs folding. Healing happens in ordinary moments, not grand ones. Patty and George turned out to be worth their weight in gold. The financial investigation continued. Temporary protections were put in place. Several accounts were frozen. Documents were preserved. More information surfaced. None of it helped Derek. Rachel filed her own legal action. Several former employees came forward. Questions started circulating through local business circles. Contracts disappeared. Relationships cooled. Invitations stopped arriving. Nobody launched a campaign against him. Nobody needed to. The truth did most of the work. Meanwhile, Melissa started rebuilding. Not dramatically, not overnight. One step at a time. She rented a small cottage near Fountain City. Nothing fancy, just a cozy place with a front porch and enough yard space for flowers. Donna helped her move. Rachel showed up too, which still made me smile. 6 weeks earlier, they'd been strangers. Now, they were comparing gardening tips. Life is weird sometimes. Good weird. Melissa planted tomatoes, then herbs, then more flowers than any reasonable person needed. I didn't question it. After 21 years of living with someone who controlled everything, she deserved a few unnecessary flowers. Some mornings were harder. I'd call and hear it immediately. The sadness, the anger, the grief. Not grief for Derek. Grief for the years, the birthdays, the anniversaries, the future she'd imagined. One afternoon, she called while unpacking Christmas decorations. I found the ornament from our first year married. I knew exactly where this was going. You okay? No. We sat on the phone together while she cried. Sometimes that's all you can do. Fixing isn't always possible. Showing up is other changes happen too. Melissa started walking every morning, first around the block, then 2 blocks, then through the neighborhood, then all the way to the library and back. A little farther each week, not because she was trying to reinvent herself because movement felt good. Forward felt good. As for me, I learned a few things too. I came to Tennessee ready for a fight. Honestly, I expected my military background to be the most useful thing I brought. Turns out, it wasn't. Not even close. The useful thing wasn't training. It wasn't discipline. It wasn't self-defense. It was being willing to sit beside someone and believe them. That's harder than people think. Months later, Patty called with final updates. The settlement process was moving forward. Melissa would be okay financially. Not rich, not ruined. Okay, at our age, okay, is underrated. Very underrated. The following August, I drove back to Knoxville for a visit. The air was hot. Cicadas buzzed in the trees. The kind of southern summer day where everything moves a little slower. Melissa and I sat on her porch drinking iced tea. A ceiling fan spun lazily overhead. My knee brace peeked out beneath my jeans. Her tomato plants had completely taken over one side of the yard. She noticed me staring. They got out of hand. They look happy. Tomatoes? You? She smiled. The smile reached her eyes this time. That hadn't happened much a year earlier. We sat quietly for a while. The sun lowered behind the trees. Neighbors walked dogs. Someone down the street mowed a lawn. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Exactly what she'd been fighting to get back. Eventually, Melissa spoke. Do you ever wish we could go backward before Derek? She shook her head before I lost myself. I thought about it longer than she probably expected. Then I looked at my sister, the woman who had survived more than most people knew. The woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece. The woman who finally understood her own worth. And I answered honestly, no. She looked surprised. Why not? Because the answer seemed obvious. Because now you know how to find your way back. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The evening breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a screen door slammed. Life continuing. Life always continuing. That's when I realized something. The best revenge was never making Derek suffer. The best revenge was making sure he no longer controlled the story. Melissa had her own story again, and that was worth more than anything he ever took. If this story stayed with you, thank you for listening. And if you've ever had to rebuild your life after someone made you doubt yourself, remember this. Starting over isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you'll ever